Yo, what is up guys, your boy Sales here, bringing you guys another discussion video about the best decks for January of 2018. Before I get started with this video, I want to say that these are my opinions and my thoughts, so if you do disagree, leave them in the comment section below. So first off, I want to talk about Pendulum Magicians. Pendulum Magicians are going to be one of the best decks, not only because it's so powerful, but because how consistent the deck is, and because we're getting Heavy Metal Foes Electrum, the deck becomes so much more consistent and more powerful, and the combos in decks are just very crazy to where this deck can excel and destroy a lot of decks. Not to mention, the deck is still at full power, and we have 3 Wavering Eyes, which is actually really crazy, and we have 3 Joker, 3 of everything, and the deck is just super powerful. And Time Pendulum Graph is just one of the best cards in the game, being able to get rid of cards really easily, and especially the effect that where it sends a card from the field to the graveyard, which is actually really powerful because it doesn't target and it doesn't destroy the opponent's monster. We already know that Pendulum Magicians are one of the best decks even to this day, with Spirals being very dominant, and other decks in the meta are very strong, like Trickstars and Dinosaurs and ABCs and True Dracos and Paleos, just all these other decks. But Pendulum Magicians were the best deck in the TCG before Spirals came out. The next deck I want to talk about is Burning Abyss. Now, although I'm not a Burning Abyss expert and I don't know really anything about the deck besides the effects, Burning Abyss have been topping in the OCG and the TCG recently, even with Spirals being one of the dominant decks in the format. We already have Cherubini out in the OCG, and sooner or later we are going to get Cherubini in the TCG, but this card brings a lot more power to the deck and gives a lot more options to the deck so that the deck can excel way more than it already did. Not to mention that Burning Abyss are already almost at full power in the OCG, and just looking at the past in the TCG, we know that Konami likes to support these new cards for old archetypes by bringing some cards off the list. Even with me not having a lot of knowledge about the deck, I know that this deck can fit in a lot of floodgates and a lot of hand traps that can really effectively hurt a lot of decks in the meta. So this deck can kill a lot of decks with just the floodgates and the hand traps it can put in its deck. Now, the next few decks I want to talk about varies from whether you play in the OCG or TCG, but the next deck I want to talk about is Invoke. Now, Invoke has saw a lot of success in the OCG and the TCG, but mainly in the TCG recently because of how many hand traps and how flexible and how splashable this deck can be. The Invoke deck has a lot of strong monsters, and the deck is just very consistent to where you could just throw this in pretty much any deck and you would get a lot of success and a lot of really good wins off of it. Now, we've seen this deck in a lot of decks like True Dracos, we've seen this in Infernoids, we've seen this in a lot of different decks, but because we don't have 3 Alistairs in the OCG, we won't see it that much in the OCG, but in the TCG, we will be seeing this a lot. Now, we know that this deck does have a few problems, being that it relies heavily on the normal summon, and if you stop the effect of Alistair or stop the activation or the resolution of invocation, the deck can suffer really badly. But if you can get through those problems, this deck can excel very well. Now, the next deck I want to talk about is Paleo Frogs. Paleo Frogs have a lot of very powerful trap cards in their deck, and they're very consistent and can pull out Toad very easily and Mistar Boy. But a lot of the problems come with evenly matched and a lot of other spell and trap card removals to where this deck can really be kind of bad in some situations. But if you can get through all those trap cards and spell and trap card removals, the deck can be very strong. The next deck I want to talk about is Zephyrus. Now, we don't have Denglong in the TCG, but in the OCG they do have 1 Denglong, so Zephyrus can do a lot of crazy combos and can make really nasty and crazy boards turn 1. So that is why I think Zephyrus are going to be one of the best decks in the OCG. I don't know too much about the TCG builds, but this deck definitely have a lot of strong plays, and it is one of the best decks in the OCG currently, even with Spirals being one of the strongest decks. Now, the last 2 decks I want to talk about is True Dracos, and I will get to ABCs in a moment, but True Dracos have a lot of powerful plays, and since we have 3 Masterpiece and 3 Dragonic Diagrams in the TCG, it's going to be very good. But in the OCG, True Dracos are not that good, let's be honest here. But True Dracos still have a lot of very powerful plays, being able to play Card of Demise and Pot of Duality and all these draw power cards to where the deck can really excel. And they have a lot of floodgates like Anti-Spell Fragrance and Imperial Order to where this deck can destroy a lot of decks. Now moving on to ABCs, we know this deck has a lot of strong plays and can be successful because of just how powerful ABC Buster Dragon is and how easy it is to get it on the field with a lot of the crazy combos that we have found with Destrudo and Photon Thrasher and a lot of other cards that we have tested out in the TCG and in the OCG, but not really in the OCG because they do have ABC Buster Dragon at 1, but in the TCG this deck is going to be very, very good, not only because it's very consistent, but because how powerful this deck can be in certain situations. Now, the reason why I mentioned True Dracos and ABCs at the same time is because they both lose to kind of the same thing. They both lose to not getting their boss monsters out, being Masterpiece and ABC Buster Dragon. If they can't get those cards out, they can't really win any games at all, really. And that is why I mentioned them both at the same time. So that is what I think about these two decks. Now, the last deck I want to talk about is Trickstars. We all know the favorite deck of the format, right? Trickstars are one of the best decks in the format, not only because of how consistent the deck is, but how powerful Reincarnation is in the deck. Now, we don't know what is going to happen in the TCG in terms of the ban list, but we know that Trickstars are still topping in the OCG kind of a little bit, but you know, Spirals are being very dominant in the format, so we don't really see Trickstars that much. But in the TCG, we know this deck is very powerful and very consistent and just can easily block your opponent with Reincarnation and just a lot of the hand traps that it can play in the deck. So that is my list of the best decks in the beginning of 2018. So let me know what you guys think about this list, and I'm out.